Everybody's been asking what's wrong with boys, but the reality of the situation is we built a system without them in mind, and then we say they're malfunctioning when they don't fit into it. Let's get into it. Before we go too far, my name is Casey. I've been a husband, father, and a therapist for more than a decade, and I have seen boy after boy come into my office telling themselves and having their educational system and their household systems telling them that they're disordered. And for my one son, I don't want him to grow up in a world that misaligns what it means to be a boy and then tells him he's malfunctioning. So if you can get behind a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom in America, please like, share, and subscribe on the way. And let's get into what is going on with the boy crisis.
Exploration. So instead we feminize boys by making them sit like little girls in circle time, and even little girls can't sit in circle time.
I would like to highlight some authors that really know exactly what's going on with boys and have identified rightly, apart from political ideology, what is going on psychologically with boys. Leonard Sax says that boys mature later on a neurological front, and therefore when they begin to read or be more competent in school at a later time, they begin to feel separated from their peers, their female peers in the classroom. Then they get outed, they're outgrouped, they're treated as different, and they require movement, risk, and competition, which is all denied in schools now. What you must do if you're a good student nowadays is be studious, sit still, have early emotional regulation, be socially attuned to what other people's feelings are, and then desk-based learning, less physicality. All of what it means to be a boy is being suppressed within the modern educational system. And in order for a boy to meet criteria for ADHD, they have to demonstrate criteria in two different circumstances, two environments. One of them almost always being school. And so when these boys enter into school and they act like boys, the teacher comes back to the parent and says, your son can't sit still, there's something wrong with him. And then inevitably the parent will want them to succeed. They'll go along to get along, and then oftentimes that boy ends up medicated. And so the system has been set up for a studious young girl, and then we're telling boys that they're abnormal or they're disordered when they don't fit into it.
So they need to run and jump and push and explore, and they're not getting to do that. Instead, they're sitting quietly and they're going crazy. So basically what we're seeing is distractibility in a lot of these little boys is just stress.
Johnathan Haidt and Jean Twenge in 2010 identified that this was the breaking point in which boys started, and really girls too, started becoming much more mentally unwell, being diagnosed much more persistently with mental health disorders at a younger age. And that, of course, is the identifying point of when the front-facing camera phone became available. So it used to be when we had camera phones on the back, you were taking pictures and possibly filming things that were happening outside of yourself. Now that it's front-facing, everyone began to look inward and be reflective about themselves. The self-esteem crisis ensued. And so sleep collapsed, of course, attention fractured, real-world play wasn't happening, real-world risk-taking wasn't happening. In Jean Twenge's iGen book, she says that teens have become less resilient, more anxious, more independent, more disengaged. And in Johnathan Haidt's Anxious Generation book, he says, phones don't just distract, they rewire reward systems, hijack dopamine, and destroy sustained attention. For boys, already more impulsive, reward-driven, and more prone to risk-taking, this is gasoline on the fire. And now boys can't sleep, they're overstimulated, they're bored by abstraction, and they're detached from real-world embodied experience. And then we call it ADHD when they can't concentrate in schools, when we've set up the entire system between smartphones and education to absolutely flood them with negative reinforcement.
To little boys, and we're labeling them, and then if they can't sit in circle time, the school calls parents and says, your child has ADHD, we'd like to medicate your child.
Right.
So does that suit the schools? Of course it does. It suits the schools because they get a quiet little passive sedated boy.
So when boys started failing at higher rates than girls, the system adapted, not to boys, to itself. Instead of changing classrooms, screen exposure, movement restrictions, or developmental expectations, we tried to change the boys. We give them powerful stimulant medications and expect that they adapt to us. Medication becomes a fix, and for an environment that is refusing to change and refusing to question its own interventions. That's not treatment, it's institutional self-protection, and therapists in my industry are protecting their bag by keeping boys sick, keeping them in treatment, and keeping them medicated in order to continue to have their opportunity for them to be a client and to keep making money from them.
On boys and men, they're not doing great. They're not doing great with health, with wellness, with life expectancy, with criminality, with educational attainment, with employment. Women are kicking our butts.
Warren Farrell, in his book, The Boy Crisis, said that historically, boys learn and derive value from competence, responsibility, risk, provision, and contribution. Now, all of these systems, especially as men have begun to earn less and less than their female counterparts, modern systems offer boys safety without significance. Just be studious. Again, stimulation without achievement. Video games, you level up on there, nothing happens in the real world. And rules without purpose, because if you're loud, you get up too often, you're too physical, or you're too disengaged, then you're just going to suffer the consequences. When boys disengage, Farrell notes something critical. When girls struggle, we ask how society failed them. When boys struggle, we ask why they failed. Cannot we adapt the systems to boys who are failing hand over fist, just like we did to girls? What is wrong with society that they don't care enough to look into how to change and adapt to these young men who are growing up in this environment? So let's put all these authors together. Today, in our modern American society, a boy who can't sit still, who can't focus without digital saturation, and who sees no path to purpose and meaning in their life is not seen as a developing male in a hostile environment. He is seen as a behavioral problem. So we diagnose, we medicate, and we manage, and then we wonder why boys disappear. Why are boys going rogue? Why are boys going so far into digital systems and digital society, social systems that are so bad for them? This is a society-level problem, and we're putting the onus of the fix on these young boys and men who deserve better. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is the fact that the incentive structures have been set up to throw flowers at the system and to take any affirmation away from the boys. Those systems reward quiet compliance, predictability, risk avoidance, social, emotional, touchy-feely, and pharmaceutical interventions. They punish physicality, they punish competition, they punish maturation in boys, and they punish masculine development. These are all things that we must re-engage with and have rites of passage that are going to mean that boys can begin to make their way in a world who is actively telling them that they're toxic. Here's the bottom line in the closing statement. Boys are not malfunctioning girls. They are responding rationally to irrational systems. Until we redesign the environments around boys so that they can actually develop, we'll be diagnosing the casualties, and the only systems that will benefit from that are the mental health practitioners who are making bank off of insurance companies. Please do not, and pharmaceutical companies will be doing the same. Please do not overlook boys. And as they turn into men, they still hold today the monopoly on kinetic force. We do not want to continue to overlook boys who have meaning, value, purpose, and yes, even they are dangerous. And they should be dangerous. And if we continue to poke the bear, don't be surprised when you get the claws eventually from these young boys and men who've been told the whole of their lives that they're toxic, who've been given systems that weren't set up for them, and then they've been told that they're behind. And then also, by the way, step aside, sit down, shut up, because your life is just not simply as valuable as your female counterparts. It's not as valuable as the people who are competent, compliant, and sitting still. I refuse to go into the night having not tried to feed the bear something that was good for them instead of poking it with a stick and then being surprised when you get the claws. If you'd like to feed the bear something useful Good for them. Please like, share, and subscribe. I would love your assistance in supporting young boys and men. Let's do it.